We're on the top of Daf Daled Beis, and we're up to Rabbi Chizkiah, which is 3 lines down from the top. But before we go on to Rabbi Chizkiah, let's backtrack for a moment and remind ourselves of what we learned in the Mishnah on the bottom of Daf Gimel Amid Beis, and it says there, Nochri vakusi sheshaklu ein mekabla mihem. And then it says, ein mekabla miyadam kinei zavim v'kinei zavos v'kinei yoldos chatos v'ashamos zaklal kol shenidar v'nidav mekabla miyadam kol she'eno nidar v'nidav ein mekabla miyadam. And if we take a look on Daf Daled Amid Aleph, we will see that Rabbi Ba interprets the Mishnah as referring to the sheet of Rebbe, as reflecting Rebbe's shita that a kusi has the same status as a nochri. And that's why the Mishnah combines nochri and kusi and ein mekabla mihem. We don't accept their shkolim. As to Reb Shimon Gamliel, who argues with Rebbe, and he maintains that a kusi is ki Yisrael l'chol davar, then certainly he's chayiv in Masechet Shekalim. But then the Gemara quotes Rabbi Eliezer, and according to Rabbi Eliezer, his shita is that we can reconcile the Mishnah with Rabbi Shimon Gamliel as long as we assume that the Mishnah is talking about nachrim, but not kusim, which means that as far as kusim is concerned, the Mishnah would agree that we accept the Masechet Shekel because kusim have the same status as Yisraelim. And we're going according to Rav Shimon Gamliel, who holds that kusi ki Yisrael l'chol davar. And then the Gemara quotes a Mishnah. It says, Vasnisa, our Mishnah actually is Benachrim, Habekusim Lo, Vitoni Ken. And we actually have a brisa to this effect, that we accept the shkalim of Gerim, and that brisa derives from the extra word Adam at the beginning of Sefer Vayikra, L'Rabos Sagerim, and the word Mikem is a miyud for Mumrim. And since Kusim do not have the stature and the status of Mumrim, which are Mishumadim, therefore we can accept from them the Shkolim. The problem is going to be, as we saw yesterday, that now we're going to have to chop up the Mishnah into pieces, because as far as Shkolim is concerned, Einochinami, the way Rabbi Eliezer learns it, we are Makabel Minakusim, and the Mishnah is only excluding Goyim. But as far as the Sefer is concerned, the Sefer is reflecting on Kusim, because with regard to Nachrim, there's no Hava meaning that we could accept Kine Zavin and Zavos because they don't have Tumas Ziva or Tumas Leda. So therefore, Reisha ben Nachrim and Sefer bekusim. And that's the Gemara's final maskana, according to Rabbi Eliezer. Kain who? This is how we have to interpret the Mishnah. Reisha ben Nachrim, Sefer bekusim. And I have here a summary of this Gemara of Rabbi Eliezer according to the Rash Sarleo. I'll read it to you. He says, Rabbi Eliezer sover shegarsim b'Mishnah shalom makablim shkolim rak mi nachrim aval mikusim makablim shkolim veheviu raya lidivreihem lidivarav mi brayso shemishumadim lo makablim korbanos dafka mishumad l'kol tarkula aval mishumad l'davar echad makablim menu v'lachein makablim shkolim mikusi. But hikshal dvarav Mea Mishnah. She'im nomar shelo nizkar b'reisha shel Mishnah kusi. If we take out the kusim from the reisha, because we are makabel shkolim from the kusim, madua hayu tzrichim lomar b'Mishnah shelo makablim kinim kinei zavim v'zavas mi nachrim. You're telling me the whole subject of the Mishnah from A to Z is nachrim. What was the havamina that we would be makabel kinei zavim and zavos from a nachri when there's no tumas ziva? V'ein lomar shareisha b'nachrim v'seifa b'kusim ela mukrach me'areisha she'igam kein b'kusim v'lachein hoysab mishnah tzricha lomar she'ein mekabel mikusim kinei zavim u'zavos. Oh, so now the Rash Soleo adds another element into the equation. He says the Makshan, who really represents Rabbi Ba and rejected Reb Lazar, he holds that according to you, Reb Lazar, it should come out that the Reisha is referring exclusively to Nachrim. How could that be? Then the Seifa is referring to Kusim. So what was the Makshan's understanding there? The Makshan, says the Rash Soleo, came to the conclusion that the Reisha also refers to Kusim. And if that be the case, we now begin to understand that in the Seifa, why did the Seifa have to tell me that Emakablim Kinei Zavim, etc., Minan Nachrim? What was the point to that? I mean, that's obvious. Here's where the Rash Soleo adds an element. He says, "Ve'hoisa Mishnah tzricha lomar." The Mishnah had to tell me she'ein mekablim mikutzim kinei zavim uzavos afshem goyim. Why was it necessary to tell me that? Evon shenitmeu bahem harbe Yisrael. Now that the Makshan is equating kutzim with nachrim, and we're going according to the shita that kusim are not gerim, right? We're reflecting the shita of Rebbe, and that's Rabbi Ba. So again, the Makshan here is a phantom Rabbi Ba. So the Mishnah therefore is talking about kusim as nachrim, and now you're asking me, so why did the Mishnah have to tell me that ein mekablim kinei zavim v'zavos? The answer is came at nitmu bahem harbim Yisrael, that there was an intermarriage, and many Jews married kusim. I never knew that, so that's a chiddush to me. And therefore, yomakom lachshosh, maybe we should accept their kinei zavim, because perhaps what we see in front of us as a kusi is really, in truth, a Ben Yisrael. In other words, if we went back to his lineage, his mother and his grandmother and his great-grandmother, they were all Yisraelim. Because way back when, there was an intermarriage. So since the Kusim and the Yisraelim married into each other, it was apparently quite common. We should therefore accept that Kinei Zavim. And the only answer to our Mishnah then, on behalf of Rabbi Elazar, is Reisha bin Nachrim v'Seifa b'Kusim. But the Makshan, representing Rabbi Ba, has a much more consistent interpretation of the Mishnah, in which the Mishnah, both in the Reisha and the Seifa, is referring to Kusim. But we're holding like Rebbe that Kusim are Kinachrim. We need a Chiddush in the Seifa that we can accept their Kinei Zav, because we would have had a Havamina to say No, we need the sefer to tell me we reject that kininoch. We are having to say to accept that kininoch because Shema nitvu ben Yisrael yesh lachshosh ulakabel. Now he says that Rav Eliyahu Fulda has a different interpretation of this Gemara, but I think I'll leave that for another time. B'li neder. What I would like to discuss is this brisa that the Gemara here on Daf Daled Amud Aleph quotes as a support text for Rabbi Lazar to try to prove that we are makabel machzis hashekel from kusim, because again, Rabbi Lazar is representing Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who says that a kusi is kisrael l'chol davar. And the Brisa says, Adam l'rabos es hagerim, mikem lahotzi es hamumrim, and this Brisa is implying that we do accept the machzis hashekel from kusim. We're only excluding from the word mikem, mishumadim, but not kusim. So the Mefarshim asked the following question: why Adam l'rabos es hagerim? What would be the havamina here to exclude gerim? Ger is ki Yisrael l'chol davar. Why would he be excluded from machzas shekel? So this is a kasha of Rabbi Eliyahu Mifulda. Madu tarch l'ribui l'gerim shemakrivim shemakablim mihem. Whatchamacallit, we call them shkolim, and makrivim will receive their korbanos. Now, there's one point here that's a little bit technical before we go on that has to be sort of a glitch that has to be ironed out. This raya that the Gemara quotes on behalf of Rabbi Lazar and it says Vitani Ken, right? That we accept from Kusin. So what is the subject of this brisa? I thought before I saw the Rabbi Eliyahu Mifulda that the subject of the brisa is shkolim, but I think you could make an argument that that's not so. Why? Because the brisa quotes a pasuk. The only thing is that the brisa doesn't quote the whole pasuk. It just quotes Adam and Mikem, Adam l'rabos hagerim, and Mikem l'mayit es hameshumadim. What's the whole pasuk? Is this pasuk in the parsha of Masechet Shekalim? It's not. By Yikra Aleph pasuk Beis, daber al bnei Yisrael v'marta lehem Adam ki yakriv michem karban l'Hashem. This pasuk is in the parsha of Korbanos, not in the parsha of Masechet Shekalim. So what does it mean when it says that we accept in the case of Gerim, we reject in the case of Mumrim? So Rav Eliyahu Mifulda says that the Ribuy of Gerim, he thinks, at least in his Havamina, is coming to tell me that we accept from Gerim Karbanos of Nidarim Unidavos. I mean, that makes sense, because when you talk about karbanos and accepting karbanos, we know that in the case of Nachrim, we need a special ribui to teach us that we can accept karbanos from a Nachri if they are whatchamacallit, if they are Nidarim Unidavos, correct? Just 1 second. Mikabla mi yadam. All right, he doesn't tell you right now what the drasha is. It's a Gemara Menachos Daf Ayin Gimel Amid Beis. But in any event, we have a special ribui that we accept from Goyim Nidarim Unidavos. So Rav Eliyahu Fulda understood that in our brisa, Adam l'Rabos es hagerim is coming to tell you that gerim like Nachrim, we are makabel, right? Because it says Daber b'nei Yisrael v'atalem Adam ki yakrif mikem karban. We accept their nidarim unidavos. So he asks the following kasha. He says, "Madua tzarich ribu shegerim makrivim nidarim unidavos harei enam gruim mi Nachrim." Oh, so now he tells you that in Nachrim, there's a ribui of ish. So he answers that below ribui zeh, hoyumamidim es ish l'rabos gerim, v'lo hoya mehechan l'rabos Nachrim. In other words, when we have a ribui, we use the ribui for the lesser chiddush. And the lesser chiddush would be gerim. So we receive and accept the nidarim and nidavos of gerim, but we're not going to use the pasuk each l'rabos es hanachrim to accept nidarim and nidavos from nachrim. The only reason we are free to, the coast is clear, so to speak, to accept a drasha, a ribui of each to include nachrim, is because that drasha of each is standing on the shoulders of the drush of Adam. Now we have two drush, so we're going to use Adam l'rabos gerim, and then on top of that, each l'rabos nachrim. That's the thesis here of Rebbe Eliyahu Mifulda. Okay. Again, I'm still left hanging as to why. In other words, basically, Rabbi Eliyahu is accepting the kash. It's true. We don't need a ribui for gerim. The ribui for gerim is only a technicality to reject a havamina that maybe ish is coming to include gerim. So therefore we use Adam, and that makes ish superfluous and free for nachrim. It's just a technicality. Now, I'm not happy with it. I'll tell you why. Because what do you mean a technicality? Why do I need? No, there are three levels here. Level number one is a gebarna, a Jew that was born as a Jew. Then I have a special ribui for gerim, and then from gerim I go up to nachrim. Gerim from Adam and nachrim from each. Why would I make that division though? Why would I need? So you're telling me that if I didn't have the ribui, yeah, but you still have a ribui for that second level of gerim. I don't know. I'm not happy with it. Ubekarban aron piresh shemiloshen akosiv mikem mashma lemayit b'Yisraelim hamaviyim karban V'lachein below a ribui adam hayinu ma'amidim es haribui b'geirim. Again, it's a technicality, but there was a havamina that we would have excluded Gerim under the miud of Mikem. So if I need the ribui of Adam, Lafuke, that we shouldn't entertain that idea, and that indeed Gerim have the same status as Israel. Aval achre sheyesh ribui Adam, now ma'amidim es hamiut Mikem b'mumar. And the truth is that the best answer to this question might be the Arzarua in the name of Rabbeinu Yeshaya. Shaposik bo l'rabos shekarban gerim ton smicha v'lokamo karban nachrim she'ein somchin aleh. So the whole deal here is about smicha. Okay. Now, yesterday we discussed Rabbi Yochanan, and the question is, can we accept gifts and contributions from Nachrim for the building of the Beis HaMikdash? So, Rabbi Yochanan, betchila ein mekabel beim lo davar mesuyam v'lo davar she'ena mesuyam v'lebasof mekabel mehem davar she'ena mesuyam ein mekabel mehem davar she'mesuyam. So we interpreted the Yerushalmi as referring to Mitchila at the time that they built the Beis HaMikdash. Himself is after the Mikdash was already built. And he writes, "Hamafarshim Pirsha Mitchila Haina Mitchilas Binyan, Ulebesof Hana Liachar Shenigmar Binyan." Rashi be'erchiv Davav Hevi Perish Acher Shemitchila Shelo Haisa Ema Al Yisrael Behem Ein Makabel. Ulevasof sheyesh ema mehem makabel. Now it sounds to me that Rashi is introducing an element here of pikuach nefesh, or what we call eva. Initially, we didn't have to worry about the goyim, so if we would reject their contributions, no harm would be we wouldn't meet any harm. But basof, like say for example, during Bayesheni, doing certain large, we had to be afraid of the goyim. It wasn't an easy matter to just reject their gifts. Rabbeinu Gershon mefarish, Rabbeinu Gershon in Erchin, shebetchila hainu shelechatchila. The word tchila means lechatchila. Im lechatchila ba, the guy comes. V'rotza l'snadev. He says, you know what? I want to make a contribution. I want to take a pledge. He hasn't yet taken the pledge. Is Omer Blo, thanks but no thanks. V'ein mekabel. Aval lebasof b'di'evet. Im kvar hisnadev. He already took the pledge. Fascinating, no? How many different ways of interpreting this this Gemara Rabbi Yochanan. All right. Now, my friends, we pick up where we left it yesterday, and we're on Daf Daled Amud Beis, line 3, Rabbi Chizkiah. Rabbi Chizkiah Omar, Rabbi Simon Sha'al. There's a whole discussion here that the word Sha'al in the Yerushalmi doesn't mean what you think it means. In the Bavli, Sha'al means he asked the question, and Sha'al is the same as Omar in the Yerushalmi. Me'ata, now we have the drush of Ezra, and Ezra darshan lo lachem livnos beis Elokeinu, that we're not allowed to accept contributions from the goyim who will, boast about the fact that they built the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore ein mekabel mehem. Says Rav Simon, ein mekabel li amas mayim ulechomos ha'ir ulemigdol seha. And he says, let's read this whole episode, this whole historical period during Ezra and Nehemiah, when the Goyim wanted to contribute, and Ezra told him that Lo Lachem Livnosis Beis Elokeinu, we cannot accept your contributions for the Beis Hamikdash. Says Rav Simon, if you read the entire episode, then in Sefer Nehemiah, it says the following: Al Shem Shenemar, V'lachem ein chelik utzdaka v'zikarim b'Yerushalayim, that we don't accept the contributions of the Goyim to build Yerushalayim. It's not just the din in Beis Hamikdash, and therefore we don't accept their contributions for Amas Mayim. Amas Mayim means that you would irrigate their fields by drawing from waters in Yerushalayim, or Chomos Ha'ir, to build the walls around Yerushalayim, Migdal Sela, to build the various towers of Yerushalayim. So again, I'm not into archaeology, I don't know, but if, let's say, we'll discover Chomos of Yerushalayim or Migdalos of Yerushalayim from the period of the bias, then we have to assume that the contributions for building those Chomos and those Migdalos at the time of Ezra and Nehemiah were Jewish contributions exclusively. And that's what Rav Simon adds over here to this whole discussion. Okay, now we get back to the sugya of Kalman, right? The Mishnah says, back on Daf Gimel Amid Beis, that we don't impose a Kalman, that extra fee, in certain cases, and we only extract that fee of Kalman to someone who's chayav in Masechet Shekel. But somebody who volunteers to bring a Masechet Shekel when he's not obligated to do so, we do not add an extra fee of Kalman. So the Gemara says, Masnisa de Rabbi Meir. This Mishnah reflects the Shita of Rabbi Meir. The Yomer Rabbi Meir, Kishem Sheshiklo Torah, Kach Kalbano Torah. That just like the Torah imposed a chiyuv of Masechet Shekel, so too the Torah imposes a chiyuv of Kalbon. And the chiyuv of Kalbon is Minat Torah. Kesava Rabbi Meir b'nosein shiklo sholem shu chayav b'kalbon. The man brings, again, the word shekel in the Gemara is machzis hashekel. He brings a coin of machzis hashekel. He's not asking for any money changing. He brings the exact change. And yet Rabbi Meir says he's chayav b'kalbon. Why? Because since he's chayav in machzis shekel, ipso facto, he's chayav in kalbon. The Yomer Rabbi Meir, b'min matbeh shel H hotzi HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitachas kisei hakavod v'haro leMoshe v'yomer lo zeh yitnu. And we have a drasha cause zeh yitnu. So in other words, just like a matbeh shel H, which was absolutely clean of any admixture of what we call sigim. You know, sigim are elements, metallic elements of refuse, that have to be removed. So the chiv of Masechet Shekel is to give a matbea nekia misigim. It should have none of these admixtures of anything else. The kalbon is going to function lahashlim keneged asigim shebematbea Masechet Shekel. Our Masechet Shekel has sigim in it. It's not like the matbea shel Eish that was shown to Moshe Rabbeinu. So we are not fulfilling our requirement and our obligation by bringing a matzah shekel because there's an element of sigim inside of it, impurities, and we need to make up for the devaluation of the matzah shekel as a result of these impurities, and that's why we have to pay the kal. Now, to understand this business about kalbon, I have here a paragraph that compares and contrasts the Rambam with Rashi. The Rambam, in his Pirush HaMishnayos, in Shekalim, he says that the kalbon is mishum schar chiluf shenosin l'shulchani. In other words, we don't want to cheat the hegdesh because the hegdesh, if they accept his selah and give him back change of a shekel, because the selah is considered a full shekel, which is twice a matzah shekel. So therefore, the value on the market would include the commission fee of the chalfon, the money changer, shulchani, and therefore we don't want to cheat out hegdesh and force them to pay that extra fee. Therefore, the contributor who gave matzah shekel has to add that fee. Lefi zeh, according to the Rambam, it should come out that misha shokel b'shiklo matbea achashol matzah shekel ein mosif kalma. When hegdesh will have to involve themselves in money changing, they will take a loss if you don't make up for the fee that they have to pay to change. But if you brought exact change, according to the Rambam, there would be no need for kalma. So it's not like Rabbi Meir, who says that even if you bring a matzah shekel, you still have to pay the kalbon because it's not like the mandeshel eish. But rather, the whole push and the whole machayev of kalbon is because of the schar that you'd have to pay to the chalfon who's changing the money. But if you bring exact change, then hegdish takes no loss. Rashi in Masechet Bechoros on Daf Nun Vav and Beis says that according to one approach, the purpose of the fee of the kalbon is lehachrea. What does the word lehachrea mean? He says lehachrea means that we have to guarantee in any case of a suffix that hegdesh gets exactly what's coming to them without any loss whatsoever. And this is based on a Gemara at the beginning of Masechet Krisus with regard to the Samamonim. And the Gemara says that when we weigh the Samamonim, and the Torah requires that the Torahs be made of these Samamonim, each Samamon has to have a certain weight, we add the extra weight, which is called Hachrea, so to speak, to tip the scale, in order to guarantee that we don't give hegdesh less than exactly what's coming to them. So Rashi is telling us that the purpose of the kalbon is to cover that possible discrepancy in which the hegdesh might suffer a loss, again, probably because of the devaluation of currency. And then Rashi says, Velishna Sheni, a second lashon, to schar chiluf, that we're covering the fee that the hegdesh is going to have to pay, and they'll take a loss if they don't get that fee, to the chalfon. Mashma, mi Rashi, sheleshnei atamim, according to both explanations, af yochid hashokel machzis hashekel, b'matbea shel chatzi shekel, mosif kalbon. Now, wait a second. According to the first interpretation, that the reason for kalbon is because of hechrea, which means that maybe there was a discrepancy in the value of the matzah shekel, even though he's paying with a real matzah shekel, he doesn't need any change. there's no money change necessary here, he would have to add the kalbon for hechreya to make sure that Hegdish is getting the full value. But according to Rashi's second interpretation, that it's to cover the loss of the Hegdish to pay a Chalfon, if he's bringing the right amount, why does he have to add a Kalfon? A Kalvon. And he writes, Hadover Yevur Lefima Shekasav Rashi b'Makom Acher, another Rashi in Beitzah Daf Lamed Tes, Shemefarish Gamkein Shatam Mishum Chiluf, Ach Biofen Acher Me'Rambam. Because the Rambam said Chiluf means you're going to have to pay a money change, and therefore, ipso facto, if he's bringing exact change, there's no need to add a Kalvon. But Rashi says a different take on it. And he says the following: Hoil vashkolim ktanim v'nochim li'abdom tzarech lachlifa b'mateos gedolos yoser. In other words, Hegdesh is stuck with very small coins that are easily lost. And apparently in the society of then, it was beneficial for security purposes to cash in your small coins in order to buy larger coins. And the Masechet shekel fits into the category of a smaller coin. So therefore, Rashi is postulating that Hegdish will take a loss because they too will be interested for security reasons to protect their monies, the funds coming into the treasury, to change the Masechet shekel for larger coins. Lachein, kidei lo lahafsid lehegdish sheyitztarich lachlifon. So Begdish is going to have to pay that fee when they take advantage of the service of the money changer. Is therefore kidei lo lahafsid hegdish sheyitztarich lachlifon v'tzarich laseis lehegdish schar chiluf l'shulchani zeu kalbon. So it comes out like this, just to summarize. The Rambam clearly understood that Kalbon was Dmei Chalfon, and the reason why Hegdish would suffer a loss if you don't add the Kalbon is because they have to change the monies because you didn't bring them exact change. Had you brought them a Masechet shekel, there would be no need to add a Kalbon. Rashi, on the other hand, learns that according to one interpretation, the Kalbon is Hechreya, and therefore, for sure, even if you bring a Masechet shekel, we don't know if the Masechet shekel has the exact value of the original Masechet shekel which the Torah mandated that we bring. And in the second shot, Rashi says, it's chiluf. But Rashi has a different take on chiluf. Rashi's not saying that the chiluf is generated by the fact that you brought them a larger coin that has to be now broken down and they want change. So you brought a seller, we'll have to give you a half a seller back. We have to go to the money changer. No. Rashi is saying that even if you brought exact change, you still have to go to a chalfon because the Masechet shekel is a smaller coin and it's very easy to get lost. And Hegdish wants to switch it over to get the larger coin. Ubeperish harosh kasav tam shekosav Rashi shuk mishum echreim v'af became so much hayochid sheshok madben shel shekel kodesh eino mosif kal. So now we have another variable in the equation. The Rush says that Enoch Hinami, the reason for a kalbon is because of Hechreya, but nevertheless, if he brought exactly a Masechet shekel, he doesn't have to pay a kalbon. Why is that? Says the Rush, Yalfinan me'akosu ze yitnu v'lo yoser. Bring a Masechet shekel and not more. So whatever is considered a Masechet shekel in a particular time and place in that currency, that's zeyitnu. And zeyitnu means don't give more than the Masechet shekel. There's a separate law. The Torah says we're not permitting anyone, even a usher low, can't be most. What's the market value of the Masechet shekel today compared to the Masechet shekel of Moshe Rabbeinu? Irrelevant, says the Rosh. Zeyitnu. Give a Masechet shekel. Ach misha shokel b'matbea shel shekel sholem. Let's say, for example, you have two people who want to come as a cartel, as a unit, and they want to give a selah, which is 2 maxas shekels, and cover both of them. She'eno no saying kimat be'ah shel Torah, right? The Torah says they yitnu mina maxas shekel. They're not coming forward with the maxas shekel. They're coming forward with the selah to cover both of them. Is tzarich lahosif kalbon? Then they have to add a kalbon. Now again, what is the nature of this kalbon? The Torah requires kalbon, as we saw in Samamonim, mishomech reah. So Bishlam, if you bring a matzah shekel, then it comes on the Zayitnu, says the Rosh. And the Torah says you can't add anything. But if you're giving a selah, now we have to ask ourselves, well, how much is the selah worth? And even though on the current currency exchange rate, you're going to get 2 matzah shekels for a selah, but the truth is the selah is not worth the original 2 matzah shekels. So once you're out of the parsha of Zayitnu, then you have to guarantee that if there's any devaluation of the currency, you cover that devaluation. That's called echreya, and that's what the kolban comes in. All right. The Mishnah says, Nosan Sela Litol Shekel Chayev Shnei Kulbonos. So what's the case now in the Mishnah? A person contributes a shekel, and that's twice a matzah shekel. So he gets his change, and he gets a matbea of matzah shekel and change. The Mishnah says in such a case, he has to pay not 1 kalbon, but 2 kalbonos. Omar Rabbi Elazar, this din that you have to give 2 kalbonos in a case where you brought a shekel, a full shekel, is the Rabbi Meir. This reflects the shita of Rabbi Meir, who holds that matzah shekel is chayav min Torah, and the Torah requires you to add a kalbon. The Rabbi Meir, Omar echad shekel shu nosein v'echad shekel shu notel, meaning according to Rabbi Meir, the gizbar must receive 2 kalbonos. One, because of the increment, the odef of the matzah shekel, shehu nosein umachzil l'shokel. Now, what does this mean? Why is it that according to Rabbi Meir, the gizbar has to receive 2 kalbonos? Let's talk about each one separately. The first kalbon, he has to accept because of odef. The odef of machzis hashekel, when he gives the shokel, is olav l'shalmis dmei aprita shel hashekel l'shnei machzios. In other words, when a person brings a selah and the gizbar now has to go to the money changer in order to convert a selah into 2 machzios, 1 machzah shekel which goes into the Trumas HaLishka, and the other which is returned to the shokel, therefore has to cover that extra fee that the gizbar is going to pay in order to break down the selah into 2 machzas shekels. And that's the fee you pay to the chalfon. But why does he have to add a second kalbon? So he says here, and this is the Korban Eda, Hasheni mishum machzas hashekel shagizbar makabel imenu kechiyuvo hakolel yachad gam kalbo. So in other words, it comes out that Rabbi Meir has two different mechayvim of a kalbo, and they both overlap. In such a case, we're going to have two kalbonos, and the shokel is going to have to pay twice. One mechayv of the kalbon is simply because of the money changer fee. And since the gizbar is receiving a full sell and he has to break it down to two machzas shekels in order to return to the shokel the change, now the fee has to be covered by the shokel, and so that the gizbar doesn't take any loss, and that's called a machzas. That's called one kalbon. The second kalbon is Rabbi Meir's kalbon, and Rabbi Meir says that whenever you pay what you're obligated to pay, namely a machzas shekel, you have to add a kalbon. And the reason for that is because the machzas shekel that is being received now by the gizbar has sigim in it, right? It has those impurities, and it's not the same value as the original machzas shekel back in the time of the matbeh shel eish. Therefore, says Rabbi Lazar, we must assume that our Mishnah reflects the sheet of Rabbi Meir, and therefore Nasan Sela is chayav b'shnei kalbonos. This Sanya, now Rabbi Meir wants to bring a raya to his understanding of our Mishnah from a brisa, and therefore this requirement of our Mishnah of shnei kalbonos is not universally accepted. It's only a reflection of Rabbi Meir. Tisanya elu chayove bekalbon. In other words, if a person brings a seller and he's going to get back a machzas hashekel, is kalbon echad. The Tanna Kamma holds in this price, so all you need is one kalbon. Rabbi Meir Amar Shnei Kalbonos. So we see clearly from this brisa that there is a debate about the case of a person who brings a selah, whether or not one kalbon suffices. That's the Tanna Kamma's view, or we require two kalbonos, and that's the view of Rabbi Meir. And therefore, our Mishnah, which rules that chayav b'shnei kalbonos, reflects the sheet of Rabbi Meir. All this is Rabbi Loza. And then we get to Rav. Rav is going to reject this analysis of Rabbi Loza. And Rav in the Yerushalmi is called Mar Rav, the master Rav. Divrei HaKol. Our Mishnah of Shnei Kalbonos reflects a universal position, even according to the Rabbanon of Rabbi Meir. They would agree that in this particular case, he's chayav two kolbonos. One kalbon is Dmei Prita, right? That covers the chiluf, because we're talking about a selah. And the second kalbon is because a nosein matbea, anyone who comes forward with a matbea other than a machzas shekel, has to add a kalbon. And that's something that even the Tanna Kamma of Meir would agree. And Rav is now saying that according to Rabbi Meir, you would need three kalbonos. Whereas L'divrei HaKol, which is Rav's lashon, is in the case of two kalbonos. If you're chayiv two kalbonos, then everybody agrees you're chayiv two kalbonos, one for Tmei Prita, and the other is simply because he's bringing a coin that's not a machzah shekel. He has to pay from the kalbon. Al daiti de Rav, according to the analysis of Rav, Rabbi Meir would hold shlosha kalbonos inun. Also, Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak b'shem Rav, shlosha kalbonos inun. According to Rabbi Meir, we need three kalbonos. Echad shekel shu nosein, echad shekel shu notel, the echad dvar Torah. Okay, now what's going on here with echad shekel shu nosein, the echad shekel shu notel? What is that? Give me a minute here just to see. Second, maybe over here. This is as far as I got. It says the following. Even the Tanakama agrees that one kolban is for the shekel that he gives, and one is for the shekel that he takes. He says the shekel that he gives, right? Shu nosein, that refers to the half shekel tax that he pays with his seller, and the shekel that he takes refers to the half shekel he receives in return. He's obligated to add a kalbon for each of these half shkolim. According to Rav, the Tanakama agrees that one who pays with the seller and receives a half a shekel in return must add two kelbonos. He reasons that we view the exchange as two separate transactions. The first transaction is the payment of his half shekel obligation with his seller. The second is his receiving a half a shekel in exchange for the seller. Had either of these transactions been performed with a money changer, it would have required a money changer's premium. Okay, we called it a fee or a commission. He calls it a premium. Therefore, one who performs both of these transactions with the temple pays two kolbonos. That's not what we said. Whole nother pshat. He says this in the name of the Tiklin Chadati. Of course, the two transactions are actually two parts of a greater whole, and if performed as one with a money changer, would engender only a single fee. He calls it premium. Nevertheless, for the benefit of the Kodesh, We treat the exchange with greater stringency and view each segment of the whole as a separate transaction. The Gemara points out that according to Rav, Rabbi Meir would require not 2 kolbonos, but 3. 2 of the kolbonos in lieu of the money changes premium, as we discussed before. And that's true even according to Tanakam. Although Rabbi Meir does not require money changes premium when 2 people pay their half shekel obligations with a single seller, this is because there was no actual exchange of funds. However, where there is an exchange of funds, as in our case, it stands to reason that Rabbi Meir too would agree that the premium must be paid to Hegdesh. The third kolbon comes to fulfill the biblical obligation of adding a kolbon to each half a shekel. So basically what's going on here is that if you understand why the Tanakama would agree to 2 kolbonos, and you're willing to accept that Rabbi Meir would also agree that those 2 kolbonos have to pay, now Rabbi Meir has the additional kolbon, simply the additional payment to a matzah shekel, because it's not the same as the shekel shel H. But again, you have to understand why the Tanakhama requires 2 shkolim, and he's saying that there are 2 different transactions over here. I mean, that's not what we said. Again, let's go back to the drawing board again. We said that according to Rav Divrei Akol, Afa Tanakama Modekan, Shechayev Litein Shtei Kolbonos. Why? Echad Mishum Dei Prita. One is, and only one, is to cover the exchange rate, the commission on the exchange. Hasheni, Mikevan Shekol Nosei Matbea She'ena Makza Shekel, Olav Lahosif Kalmo. I don't know why. That's if I can only figure that one out. Again, he's not saying that it's like he says here. Not because it's made prita. Where does he get that from? I don't get it. You see, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. The interpretation that he's attributing to the Taklin Chadatin makes no sense to me, because he's saying that there are 2 separate transactions here that generate 2 separate payments of a commission. I don't get it, because it's one seller. You go over to the money changer, he breaks it down into 2 matzah shekels. Okay, it's true. One of them goes into the treasury and one is paid back to the shokel, but so what? Why should that generate 2 fees? On the other hand, I have this alternative interpretation that even the Tanakhama agrees that kol hanosei matbea she'eno matzah shekel olav losif kalmon. Why? Where did that come from? I mean, that could make sense according to Rabbi Meir, but he wants to say this in Rav in the Tanakhama. Now, again, I'm looking back here in the Yalkut Habiurim, and he's got a long discussion. I just don't know if this is the discussion here that's relevant to our sugi. He says, Masnisa de Rabbi Meir he, the Omer of Meir Afal Pi. Afal Pi Shein Shiklo Torah. Kiblono Torah. Kishem Sheshiklo Torah. Kach Kiblono Shel Torah. So we're saying that the way we said until now, if he pays with a matzah shekel, he has to pay a kalmon, according to Rabbi Meir. He says here that according to one girsa, Sovrim, Chachamim, Yochid HaShokel Machzah Shekel, Potter Mikalmon. Okay, that makes sense. That's what we said. Because there's no need for Dmei Chiluf. Good. And that fits very well into the Ramav Shita, that the whole purpose of the Kalmon, if you remember we discussed, is Dmei Chiluf. But if he gives the exact change, there's no Dmei Chiluf. Umefarshim dekoyal reisha de masnisim. What does it say in the reisha de masnisim? The elu chayovim bekalmon, leviim, the Yisraelim v'chulei. Mashma she'elu chayovim b'cholofen af sheshoklu b'matbea shel matzah shekel she'eno tzorch leparto. V'al zeh omru shereish de masnisik Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir says that there's an independent chiyuv of a kalmon, even if you give machzas hashekel, because of the comparison to the shekel shel eish of Moshe Rabbeinu. Yochid hashokel machzas shekel, nevertheless, according to Rabbi Meir, is chayav b'kalmon. Shnaim sheshoklim yachad is chayav b'beis kiblonos, because each one is giving a machzas shekel. V'zeu dekomer savar Rabbi Meir shemisha shiklo shekel, shoklu shekel, hainu shekel shel chol shu chatzi shel kodesh uchayev b'kalmon. So all that seems to support everything that we said today. But why would the Tanakama, according to Rav, concede that in the case of bringing a seller, you have to pay not one kalmon but two kalmonos? That doesn't seem to make any sense. All right, we have Shabbos, so we'll try to figure it out over Shabbos. I don't promise you any great inventions here, but you never know. I'm certainly open to any suggestions. Okay, then. So we'll make a note of where we got up to officially. Ha'achim ve'hashutfim, here on the bottom of Daf Dalid Amud Beis. Okay, then. Wishing you